Well, welcome back. Um, so we were just about to begin to talk about revising and the process of revising. And one of the bywords that you're likely to hear in a Landmark College writing classroom, especially those that are specifically designed for students with executive function challenges in writing, is the term, and excuse my French, shitty first drafts, which comes from Annie Lamott's wonderful book about writing called Bird by Bird. And I highly recommend the book. And the idea behind a shitty first draft is that's what we get. First drafts are inevitably, they're going to be bad. They're going to generate some useful material, but they're certainly far from a finished product that can be handed in. And the more that we emphasize and come to expect that that's just in the nature of first drafts, the less students are bamboozled by things like perfectionism and the sense that they're really no good as writers if they don't produce a truly excellent piece of writing on their first attempt. And we scaffold the process of revising by giving students, the rubric certainly, the templates to clarify expectations, but then in terms of revising, that we probably go through a series of reviews, including peer reviews and training students to work with each other using a set of questions for peer reviewing of generating constructive criticism can be very helpful. Getting interim feedback from the instructor, getting support from the writing center where students can go after hours to have someone else kind of give them guided feedback and bounce their ideas off someone else with a critical eye. And in general, giving students a lot of opportunities before they actually hand in the finished product to rethink and tinker with and revise and restructure their essay. So, with that in mind, experimenting with strength based approaches is another, I think, fairly unique feature of Landmark College writing classrooms. And by strength based, generally we're talking about using oral language. Talking. Many of our students are move easily in the realm of oral language, both expressive and receptive, but begin to falter only when that language gets into print. So using talking as a strategy, visual spatial, things like pictures, concept maps, storyboarding, graphic novel kind of way of developing ideas, using color coding to show relationships among ideas. Those are all visual strategies. And then a number of what I call motor kinesthetic, which we'll look into. The first set involves movement, and the second physical, visual, spatial building of concepts and relationships using manipulatives like Legos, Tinker Toys, and so on, which I will show to you. So, one way to use a visual approach is for students who are drafters, who generate a lot of text, which may not be particularly well organized but has a lot of potentially great ideas. One technique that we found that works really well is to have them print out their draft and print it out in a particular way that makes it easy to read from afar. So print out maybe with a very large font, maybe a 20-point font with double spacing at least between the lines. And then as you and some of my students really like to do this process when they look at what they've written, like to do it standing up. So being able to tape or tack your written product onto a wall or a bulletin board has proved helpful. Just getting out of your seat and out of in front of the computer can be very, very helpful for a lot of students who have attention focus issues, who are restless. So getting your text up in big print on the wall, and then taking a highlighter and color coding according to themes or ideas or concepts, because you may have them scattered, in no particular coherent fashion throughout your paper. And as you identify the recurrence of certain themes or topics, you color code them, and then you literally cut and paste. So you cut out the ideas and you paste together in some format all the red ideas, all the green ideas, all the yellow ideas, and experiment with organizing or sequencing them. Especially if it's on a bulletin board, you can easily move them up and down and next to each other and try to figure out what would be a compelling sequence for organizing these ideas. And that's worked quite well for a number of students. I talked a little bit about movement, and I refer you to an article that I wrote, which is available on LD Online, and I'll also link to it right here in the course, called, I think it's called Walking Legos and Tinker Toys. I had the very great pleasure of working with a remarkable English professor from Brandeis who was both an English professor and a working artist. And she was teaching, by the way, Brandeis was my alma mater. So in the alumni magazine, I saw a little filler article mentioning that Dr. Karen Klein, who was having art exhibits, was teaching a composition course that she called Advanced Composition for Visual Thinkers. And this was in the early 90s when I was struggling to help my students find more effective, productive ways to develop writing. And I corresponded with Dr. Karen Klein and visited her classroom at Brandeis, and we shared ideas and collaborated. I was really thrilled to see in her classroom some students were working with Legos and Tinker Toys and building what looked like fantastic cities or landscapes, which represented their ideas. Other students were walking their essays, and she developed an approach to both analyzing text or generating text through movement and gesture. So, for instance, if you are generating a typical persuasive essay, you would get to walk forward. You do this on your feet and imagine that the floor is something like your page. It's sort of like almost like a game board or a giant chess set, and you imagine that you start at the beginning of the paper on one side of the room, and you imagine the end of the paper, the conclusion, is on the other side of the room, but a straight line is not necessarily the best way to get from one end to the other. So as you develop ideas and advance them, you get to move forward towards your goal or end or conclusion. And as you develop or as you elaborate on ideas and add support for them, you move to the side because you are strengthening or deepening, but you're not actually introducing new content. And as you're dealing with the counter arguments, as you often are in persuasion, you have to walk backwards. And her classes also developed a set of hand gestures so that if you were doing a pro-con essay, for and against an idea, as you might, and actually one of my students elaborated on this approach by putting a line of scarves or a string down the center of the room and marshaling her ideas on one side, the pro-arguments, and then the anti-arguments on the other side of that line, and advancing them knowing that you needed to have more pro-arguments getting you closer to your conclusion on on the side that you were arguing than on the against side, and that if you didn't, then you needed to go back and do some more research and gather some more ideas. And also the hand gestures would be something like, so on the one hand, we believe this, but on the other hand, people argue differently. And when we did a because or consequently, she put her hands together in a snowplow as if they were causing something. And in the article, you can read about this choreography of essay writing, which can also be used, interestingly, to analyze essays. So if you walk an essay, that you're reading in class to try to analyze the structure, you might find yourself tracking back and forth as you do pro con, or compare contrast. You'd be going from A to B to A to B. And sometimes you discover you just walk in circles because you're dealing with kind of circular tautological arguments. So it turned out to be a very inventive and liberating way to think about text structure by using your body in space. There's also wonderful work on the kind of embodiment of cognition in a book by Sian Bilok called How the Body Knows Its Mind, or How the Mind Knows Its Body. She's from the University of Chicago, and I'll put a reference to that in our resources. And she also talks about the benefits of meditation for clearing the mind and beginning to generate better, more logical, more productive thoughts. So, getting up and walking, we also walk stories. I talk in the article about how you can walk and mime the events in a story, and that for many students who are working on narrative, walking and talking their stories, possibly recording with an audio recorder or having someone take notes, was a very effective way to get you to generate more specific detail and a better sequence, and we even for your narrative. And we found that we could enhance the benefits of this process by using storyboard paper. This is a specific kind of paper used by videographers or filmmakers to very clearly delineate what appears in each cell or frame of a movie. And emphasis is not on being artistic, not representing the events in a highly sophisticated, artful way, but using stick figures and symbolic representation to just kind of sketch out the main the main scenes in a narrative, to remind you about sequence and which scenes you want to develop with a more descriptive detail or perhaps greater narrative elaboration. So to talk about manipulatives, I'm actually going to make an additional recording without the screenshot so that I can show you some of the student models that my students have created over the years and how we might use them. So see you soon.